Welcome back. In last week's episode, I showed you how to make a flat, level, and square ramp gate for your trailer using minimal tools. And in this week's episode, we're going to be installing the ramp. Stick around. I've got some 3/4 inch solid rod, 3/4 inch tube, so this slides into this. We're going to make this overall 10 inches long. We're going to install grease fittings in it. I think I'm going to make these pins removable, and we're going to do 3 sections of this on the tailgate. So there'll be 3 10-inch hinges. And we also have to space these hinges off the mounting surface a little bit. So for that, I've got some 3/4 inch by 3/16 flat bar scraps. These were all just drops at my local metal yard. As you can see, this just sort of loosely fits in there. You don't want it overly tight because you want room for grease, but you don't want it too sloppy either. This is going to be the design of the hinge. It's going to be, as we said, 3/4 rod, 3/4 pipe. Overall, it's going to be 10 inches long, and the sections are going to be 3 inches to the trailer side, 4 inches on the center with a grease fitting right in the middle. I think there'll be a washer welded onto one side of the pin that drives through this assembly with a cotter pin on the end in case you wanted to remove the tailgate at some point. And because we need 3 of those assemblies, that means that we're going to need 6 pieces at 3 inches and 3 pieces at 4 inches. So what I've done is I've taken my material hold down and actually clamped it against the fence. This is going to act as a material stop. That'll chop that off at 3 inches every time, and it'll make repeating this cut really easily and quick. I always like to show and explain different types of procedures of doing things. So for here, I'm using my Evolution saw, but you don't necessarily need this. You could use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. You could use a portable bandsaw. There's all kinds of ways to get this done. And there's our 6 at 3 inches. Now we just got to make 3 at 4 inch. And if you guys don't need a saw this big, I have one in a smaller version, does bevels both ways, 8 1/4 inch, and it's $149. I'll have a link in it. I love that saw. Next thing I want to do is deburr everything, get the little ridges off the inside. I don't have an actual deburring tool for this, so I'm just going to use a step bit and just give it a quick pass inside. That'll help ream out any of this extra stuff inside. See that? Cleans that out real nice. Gives a little chamfered inside. Then we'll just do the outside over on the bench grinder. I could have bought hinges for this. I think they're around like $60 when I was looking online. But I have probably maybe $10 in materials here for everything that you see. I just got it at my scrapyard from the drop section. And it's just a nice way to be able to do it yourself. It's always fun when you can fabricate your own things, especially if it works out the way it's supposed to. You know, I just go online, kind of look at what I'm trying to do, get a few different ideas, and then just duplicate that here in the workshop. And that's exactly what I've done here, and I saved a bunch of money. Now I'm going to drill and tap for a grease fitting in this. So this is the 4-inch piece. So we're going to come in 2 inches, punch it, then drill a hole, and put in a grease fitting. This is just a jig that I made. I've had it for quite a while. It's just a piece of angle iron with a flat on it. And I'm clamping it down to my fixture table that I made using the fixture table clamps that I made. If you want to see how I did this, I'll have a link up above and you can check it out. It's a real fun, easy project to do. Measure out 2 inches roughly to center. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll get it close. That's good right there. We'll get them all punched together and then we'll drill them all at once. And I have an assortment. These are from Lubramatic. You can get them anywhere. Of grease fittings, and I'm just going to pull out 3 shorties and we'll drill it and tap it. So I thought I was actually going to have to tap this, but I didn't. The threads on these grease fittings are actually tapered, so all I needed to do is just drill a hole in this and just screw that in, and it fit nice and snug. There it is. When you're buying your grease fittings, make sure that the threaded piece is really short, because if it's too long, what'll happen is it's actually going to stick too far down into this hinge, then it's going to interfere with the pin. And just to verify it, we'll slide it onto the shaft, make sure it's all good. And there they are, all built. We just have to add the straps to them. This will probably actually be the thumbnail, I don't know. So these are how each of the hinges are going to go. So that one will be welded to the trailer. That one to the gate, that one to the trailer. So I'm going to make our pin 11 1/4. We're going to need a little bit of gap between each of these. There'll probably be like a hitch pin at one end, and then this side will have like a flat plate welded to the shaft itself, and the flat plate will allow it not to rotate when the tailgate goes up and down. So that pin will always stay in the same orientation. That'll allow that hitch pin to also stay in the up and down rotation. We don't want the pin to rotate, because if it does, it's going to bend that linch pin on the end, so we don't want that. 11 1/4, 3 of them. Doing the same thing we did as before. Each one of these 3/4 by 3/16 straps gets welded to each of those pieces that we fabricated. So we need 6 of these at 3 inches, and we need 3 of these at 4 inches. Should have just done it all at the same time, but yeah, I forgot. And here I'm just showing you a different way. To my left, you can see I've got a steel block clamped to my fence that's 3 inches away. And when I want to change the measurement, I just loosen that clamp, then tap that block over to whatever measurement I need, then snug it back up. It's a great material stock. And we're back outside, and we're out of the shop, and we're going to get this tailgate installed. And as I said in one of last week's episodes, this did have a tailgate from the factory, but somehow it's turned up missing somewhere, I don't know. When I bought the trailer, it had 4-foot sideboards on it, and it had a 4-foot gate that somebody just kind of hacked together and made. So we'll end up cutting off. This is part of the retainer for the tailgate, but we can't use these hinges. You can see the pin here. We're going to have to cut this hinge assembly off, because we're going to use new ones. This wouldn't allow us to fold the tailgate back down into the bed. We still got to redeck this trailer too. I just put a little piece of plywood over that because there's a big hole in the floor. This deck is pretty well dry rotted. This trailer came from Alabama, so being in a hot climate, things tend to dry rot versus, you know, like here in Maine, it would wet rot. Whenever you're grinding, even outside, make sure you're wearing a respirator and at least eye protection. You can see all the stuff that's coming off that abrasive blade, and it's just going up in the air. You don't want that in your lungs. There's that. They did a good job welding that on there. The top had weld, but the bottom only had 3 little tabs right there. 3 little spot welds on the bottom. Get this ground up flush, cleaned up, then we'll cut the other one off. Eye injuries are really common when metalworking, whether it's you're getting something in your eye from grinding, or whether it's grinding dust that ended up in your hair, then you go to take a shower and all that washes down into your eyes. Those are probably the 2 big things, eyes and respiratory. So just make sure you got your glasses and a respirator and you'll be in good shape. Now with everything all ground off and cleaned at the back of the trailer, now we can finally install our ramp gate. I went through and squirted on a little bit of paint. It's freezing temperatures right now, so it's all gonna just flake off anyways at some point, but in the spring we'll go through this whole trailer, we'll brush it all down, and then we'll put on a product called Chassis Saver. But before we put the gate on, one last thing that we have to do is make sure that the trailer isn't racked. Just like I showed you in last week's episode when we built the ramp gate, you want to make sure when you install this that the trailer isn't racked, because you don't want to end up welding in the hinges with the trailer racked, because that's going to help hold it in that position. I've got the trailer completely leveled left to right at the front, and it's nice and level at the back. As you can see, I've got it shimmed up all the way around with jack stands to get it perfectly level. Holy smokes, this thing doesn't weight to it. Definitely going to need some sort of spring assist on this, but I'll be able to put whatever I want on this trailer. If I want to put a tractor on it or whatever. There, that gate will fold down right in on itself just like that. See how these handles now are on the inside? So when you go to lift the gate up, you can lift it up just like this. If they were straight up and down, it might get in the way. This way you can still haul long material lengthwise on the trailer that hangs out past the gate without taking the gate off. If you wanted to load something up, you know, using a forklift, because if you have a tailgate that doesn't fold all the way in and you can't take it off, you can't load it with a forklift. So you can still load a pallet of something with a forklift with this gate folded on the inside. I wasn't really sure at first how I was going to do this, because in order to have, you want the tailgate to lay flat like I have it right now, but when it's in the normal position to drive up it, I didn't want the ramp way up above the deck of the trailer. I really want the lip of this to be even with the deck of the trailer, so it's just a nice gradual from the trailer onto the ramp transition, and it should be by doing it this way, and these spacers that we made will allow us to do that. Let me show you how this is actually going to go. We're going to actually bring these back into the shop so I can weld these pieces onto this. So these are going to get welded onto the backs of these outer ones here, because that spaces this off the trailer so that this center one can pivot. Then this one is going to go like this. So this piece here is going to get welded onto the gate and onto this barrel. I'm not going to attach this one quite yet until we get everything right where we want it, but for now we can definitely weld these 3-inch pieces onto these. I've gone ahead and built myself a little jig so that when we put this flat bar onto the bottom of our tube, that it gets centered underneath it every time. Because we don't want the tube off-centered one way or the other. So what I did is I just put a stop in my table. That's just one of these, just a shoulder bolt that I cut down. And then I built these clamps with a shoulder bolt, same shoulder bolt, so that it also works as a stop. So this is just a piece of scrap material, bumped it up against that, clamped it down. And then I just welded this fence to it, put a couple tacks on it. So now I just stick this against that and then bump that against that fence. And then every one of these will be identical every single time. Doing little things like this is just a huge time saver, and it makes it that much more accurate. So when it comes time to put everything together, you have less fit-up problems.
Whenever you have several parts to make, it's always easier if you can come up with something like this, or make some sort of template or some sort of jig that just kind of holds everything together. You'll see as I'm going here, I'm using a tool. It's actually a 5-in-1 painting tool. I use it all the time. What I'm doing here is I'm scraping down the table a little bit, getting any of those BBs off my table. Then I use it to scrape off BBs off my parts and, like I said, clean up my table. And now I'm just running down through. A lot of times I have a tendency to push when I'm using solid wire, but basically I go in whatever direction's the most comfortable. So if I'm more comfortable dragging it, then I'll drag it. If I'm more comfortable pushing it, then I'll push it. I think pushing it gives a little better penetration though.
Got them all wire brushed. They came out really nice. I'm real happy with it. Now we just got to weld them onto the trailer. All right, we've got our metal ground on the trailer where these pads are going to be welding to. I've come in 4 inches from the edge of my tailgate, and I've centered it on each side, so 3/4 here, 3/4 on the other side. I've come in 4 inches to the first part of this, to this part here. Did the same thing on the other side. I'm going to hold off on putting the center hinge on quite yet, because I want to get these each tacked. I'm just going to loosely tack them. We'll get the trailer off the jack stands, we'll move it ahead, then we'll put the tailgate down, just to make sure that everything's going to line up and fit up good before we fully weld everything out. So we'll put some decent sized tacks on it, just on the top side, so if we got to break something off, we can. And I'm going to be welding these on, or at least tacking them anyways, with flux core, just because it's that much easier. That way I can hold the part with one hand and just pull the trigger, weld it on. I don't even know if I've ever welded with this machine using flux core. I'm using 30 thousandths wire, and let's see, so we're going to go home and we're going to do flux core, select. It's already on 30 thousandths. Let's select our material thickness. Let's call it 3/16. No, let's call it 1/8 inch, because I don't want to go burning through those hinges. Select that. Okay. I'm going to space it down about 3/16, which is the thickness of this metal here.
I don't think I've done a whole lot of wire feed welding with that welder, because that's my primary welder that I use for stick welding, for all my mobile work. It's got a really smooth arc when you're stick welding. That's why I use it for that.
Now, I think I'm going to want this up in the air like this. So when the tailgate is fully up, that should be about like that. And then when it's down, it'll probably be under. Hopefully it doesn't hit. But that's why we're just tacking. because we're going to pull it ahead and we're going to try all of it to make sure everything works as we had planned.
Spoiler alert, this actually didn't work. I ended up having to cut all this apart and clean everything back up and re-weld it back on. You'll see here in a minute what happened.
Alright, you can see how this is going to work though. Like this pin will have a washer on this side, then there'll be a pin that goes down through here. The washer will have a flat ground on it so that this pin can't rotate, so that will put this pin like up and down all the time so the pin won't shear off. Let's see if it will at least lift up. Hopefully I got enough tacks on it for that to happen. I think it's going to be too low, maybe. Now let's pull it ahead and see what happens. Alright, I don't have the ramp down all the way, but I can already see that it's too low. So I think what I'm going to have to do is move these hinges up as high as I can, and then that will make me be able to move this up a little bit further. Like if I could get it to the center line of that barrel, I'd be like in good shape. I'd be pretty happy with that. But yeah, this is just too low. It's about maybe 1.5 inches lower, and I don't want that. We'll cut it apart and redo it. That's why we only tack things together. Alright, I really hope this works because I don't want to have to take it apart again. Okay, that's up in the air. Good. Hopefully I got enough tacks on it that it just doesn't come crashing down. It's about a 1-inch gap, but I'm not going to even worry about that, not even a little. That would be just fine. And also the nose of the trailer is all the way down, touching the ground. So that's making this incline of this ramp really steep. But yeah, that's going to be alright. I'm not even worried about that a little. That'll work just fine. Probably weld it out just like it sits right here.
Someone asked me the other day, how come I always use stick welding outside and they don't ever really see me using flux core all too often? And I actually had to think about that. I know why I don't use it in the workshop. I use hardwire in the workshop because I don't like all the smoke, and I try not to stick weld or use flux core in the workshop. But outside, I actually had to think about it, and the reason for that is I don't want to be tethered to it. So, you know, here I'm on a 12-foot lead, and I can only go that far away. But if I'm stick welding, you know, I can have a 25, 50-foot lead from the machine and move all around without any limitations. So that's the real reason why.
I've done a few passes on everything pretty much that I can get to. Now my least favorite part is overhead welding, all the undersides of these hinges. And another little tip, if you're having a hard time seeing your weld puddle, I MIG weld generally below 150 amps on a shade 9, just what I see best. And I also use readers to help me see, but you can also get a cheater lens for inside your helmet. And another thing you can do is put a little bit of direct light on your weld puddle. Just make sure that it's not getting into the back of your hood, because that'll make it more difficult to see.
And a couple more tips for you guys struggling on welding overhead. Make sure you're comfortable. And that goes really for any position. If you're comfortable, you're going to do a better job and you can maintain that position for longer. But especially overhead, because it's a little more difficult. And turn your machine down about 10 amps because you're going to want to have less amperage so it doesn't drip down on you.
So with our tailgate all finished up, I threw a little bit of paint on it. The way I do that is I just take a torch, heat up the metal. Then once the metal's good and hot, then I just give it a quick spray of paint. It's almost like a baked enamel finish. Now what we got to do is we got to make it so that this pin doesn't end up sliding through. So we're going to put a big washer on it and grind a flat on it. So I've stacked up all three just to make it easier, so I can do all three at once.
So I'm once again grouping things together. So not only is this actually saving time, but it's making sure that all three of these are all exact.
I brought this into the workshop because it'll be a little bit easier having a vise to clamp this in while we weld on the washer. Now we're going to drill the holes for these pins. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to take my drill vise and clamp this rod in the vise, making sure that this is vertical. We want this hole to be up and down. So then to find out the size drill bit that I needed for this pin, I just took this tool here and slid it onto the pin. that gave me that size right there, and then I just went to my drill index and got a drill bit that was one size larger than this. Now I'm going to chamfer the hole a little bit, just using a larger drill bit just to make it easier to get the pin in. Alright, let's give it a go, see how this thing works. I think that pin might be too high. Well, unless I went like that, that would be okay. See, those flats prevent the pin from turning. I might get a different style pin for that has like a ring that loops around, if you guys know what I'm talking about. I think it'll work and maybe look a little better. I've contemplated a few different ways on how I want to latch this tailgate, because I want to be able to latch it when it's down like this, and I want to be able to latch it when it's up. So I think for that reason I'm going to use this style latch, and I'm going to attach it to the actual gate of the trailer. That way when it's down, I can have a plate that's welded to the trailer that has a hole in it that'll secure it when it's in the down position. There'll be a tab that comes out here that'll secure it in the up position. And just lengthen the trailer by, you know, this much right here. This will have a hole in it that will receive this pin. As I've said before, guys, when you work alone, you got to come up with your own ways of doing things and clamping things and holding it. So this is just another one of those. Just got a piece of scrap metal holding pressure against that gate, and I've got a strap that goes from the top rail of the trailer up to the top of the gate. And I've just got a framing square set on the top rail. Now at the bottom, gap's a little tighter, a little wider up here. So I got to crank on this a little bit to get that even. Then I'll know how long to make this piece here. So let's crank it a little there. It's getting better. We got to go a little more. That's pretty darn close right there. Alright, let me show you what I got. Prep work is everything with welding and fabrication. So I've beveled this edge back a little bit because I want to be able to grind the weld flush so it looks like it's all one piece when I'm done. But on the inside, I'll leave the weld proud just to make it stronger. So I've cleaned this all back. I've cleaned this all back, got all the mill scale off it, cleaned this back, and like I said, I've V'd this out so I can grind my weld flush. Then those taillight housings will mount just like that. That is going to be awesome. So that'll make the taillights really visible from the back. It'll be unobstructed view, up a little bit higher than what we currently have down here, so it's a little more visible. I think that's going to work awesome. And here's the fit up. I've just got the other bracket for the other side clamped, holding this level and parallel to the trailer. And then this here, I just checked it by using a framing square, making sure that that's nice and flush. So I'm going to get this all welded on, and then I'll do the other side off camera. And then I'm going to show you an awesome way to get this gate perfectly 90 degrees to this trailer without using a framing square. It's going to get it even more accurate than that. Not that you need it more accurate than that, but I always like showing you a couple different ways of doing stuff.
The goal here is to make the seam on the top and on the inside appear as though it came this way from the factory and that it's all one piece. The welds that will be on the inside will be completely hidden by the taillights.
So I'll grind that flush afterwards, just for appearance, just so it looks like the trailer was built that way. But I still got to get up underneath.
And those taillight housings are really high quality. They're heavy gauge and you could actually stand on them.
That's the look we're going for. Nice and smooth. Looks like it was built that way. Rounded edges. I can leave that weld exposed just like that without grinding it. That'll be fine. And then these taillight housings eventually will mount on it just like that. So I'll be able to weld it along this surface and along the top surface. Alright, this is what I wanted to show you. We want this gate 90 degrees to this trailer. One way we can do it without fiddling around with a framing square and whatnot is with a digital angle finder. So what we do is we zero this out. So now it thinks that this is level. It doesn't matter. It's actually going downhill quite a bit right now, but it thinks it's level. Now we're going to put it on the tailgate. So you can see right now it is 85.6 degrees So now I'll just turn my ratchet until it's 90. Then we'll know that this tailgate is exactly 90 degrees to the top rail of the trailer. We're close, 88. 89.9. I would say that's close enough to 90 degrees. Now, we'll scratch a little line where the center of this is. I'll highlight it just so we can see it a little bit better. That little mark is the center of that pin. Now I could drill this with a drill bit, but this is the perfect project for a magnetic drill. I got a 13/16 annular cutter on it.
And as I mentioned earlier, there's always more than one way to accomplish the same end result. This just makes it a little bit easier and it's a little bit quicker. But you could always use a hand drill like I mentioned. And if you're wondering about any of the tools that I'm using, I'll have links down below.
And for those of you that are regular to the channel, you'll know that this is actually my drill press. I use this mag drill on a modified drill press that I picked up on Facebook Marketplace for like 30-35 bucks. I'll have a link to that video up above. And it just makes my work in the workshop and mobile work so much easier. The way these work is there's a switch on the back that turns on the magnet. This one turns on the drill. The drill will not turn on if the magnet is not on. So I just get it up here close, hold it where I think it should go approximately, and then turn on the magnet, just like that. If you're doing it any distance up overhead, you should have this tied off. It comes with a strap. That way if you blow a breaker or trip a breaker or something, it doesn't end up falling and crashing to the ground, because these aren't cheap. This is 2-inch angle right here, and you can see right there that it has a center point. So I am just bringing the bit down to the tape measure and finding 1 inch. That easy, and we're through. Makes a nice, smooth, straight, accurate hole. And the rest is simple. I centered the pin up and down in the hole, made sure it's 90 degrees to the gate. That's where it needs to be. Now I'm going to weld it out. So to open it, pull the pin back and lock it, and then to close it, let it go like that. And that pin can fold down out of the way. I still got to wrap this weld around the inside, and same thing with the bottom. I got to wrap that around too. But yeah, overall, super happy. And they both hit at the same time. If you look at this pin, you see how it's resting to the back of the hole. You come to this side, it's doing the exact same thing. And the good thing about that is when it goes down the road, they're both catching at the same time. That's good. I'm happy with this progress. And that's all there is to it, guys. Hopefully this gives you guys some ideas on different ways of tackling a project just like this. And I hope I demonstrated that you don't need a whole lot of fancy tools to do it. A few basic tools, a level, frame and square, whatever you have on hand, you usually can make do with what you have. Be sure to tune in next week, because we're going to be tearing off this decking and we're going to be doing all brand new wiring, and we're going to be running it in conduit. Then we got to hook up electric brakes. I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. New videos every Friday. So until next week, take care, stay safe, and God bless.